Okay, printmakers, I am going to show you a whole bunch of supplies that you're going to need with your images for your soft cut block. So I'm going to start by showing you that you're going to receive 4 images. The images will have writing on them. One will say original, one will say shadows, one will say midtones, and one will say highlights. The first thing that you need to do is to make sure that you understand which one is which. So your original is obviously the black and white image. I have my text reversed, so if there's anything in your image that needs to be reversed, I'll do that for you because it will flip to the other side. Your shadows will be all of the black tones in your image. That will be your third carve. Your midtones will be all the grays in your image. That'll be your second carve. And this is the one that you need to know about, and that's your highlights. That one will be your first carve. So that's really important to know the difference between them. So you'll set those aside. The next thing is that your image will be the same size as your actual block. So here's your soft cut block. It's 6 by 9. My image happens to be horizontal. So I will eventually be lining up the edges with that horizontal edge. A couple other supplies you'll need to have around and ready, although this will take several weeks to do, but just so you have everything prepared. You'll have your monoprint images that you've printed, so just those fun kind of single images. You'll have a series of those laid out and ready. You also will have just a series of different color papers. I gave you a whole pack of white paper as well as other color papers, so you decide what color papers and what you want from those. Those need to be around. You also will need your brayers. You got one brayer that looks like this and one brayer that looks like that. You'll need both of those. In addition, you'll need a piece of plexiglass and some kind of newspaper or something to protect your surface. This should be your other piece of plexi that you haven't printed on. If you run out, I have extras. You also got different inks. I don't know what colors you got, but this is a whole range of colors. You should have at least 2 to 3 colors in addition to the box that had colors in it as well. So you should probably have a total of 4 colors, maybe 5. I'll talk with you in class about getting other ink colors in addition for your planning of your print. Next thing that you'll need is you'll need a pencil and a pen. So a ballpoint pen and a normal pencil that can draw pretty dark. You'll need a palette knife, which is in your kit. And then you've got a Ziploc bag that has all of these little parts in it. This is your handle that has a tightening device here. Then you have 5 blades. Each blade has a different number on it. So this is a number 2. I have a number 4, a number 1, a number 3, and a number 5. So 1 through 5, you should have 5 blades. Keep those all kind of contained within your plastic bag. And then obviously we'll get to work on how to plan out your image. Okay, I have now gotten a pair of scissors. I have my pencil. I have some tape. It doesn't matter what kind of tape. And I have my soft block right here. I'm going to take all 4 images and I'm going to stack the original on top so I know where my outside lines are. That way I can cut out all of them exactly as is. And if you feel like you need to relabel them afterward to know which one is original, highlights, midtones, and shadows, you could just label the kind of a bottom edge of them. You wouldn't label the back because the back will get colored on here in just a moment. So I'm cutting out all of them exactly as they should be and cutting off the white borders of the paper. And then you can discard those extra white edges there. You can just discard those. Now I'm ready to take my highlight one, which looks like this. That's my highlights. Remember, it's only the whites in the image. The whites actually appear as gray, and that's really, really hard to understand, but just trust me that if you were to look at your original image, the lightest areas on the original image, which would be the sides of my columns right here, the side of my column would be the same as the side of the column there, that it's showing up as gray. That's how Photoshop finds the color and defines it as the highlight. Same thing here in the pediment right here of the Parthenon. That's also my lightest area. That's where I'm going to be carving away. So whatever's gray, I'm carving away. And we'll talk through that in a little bit more detail. I'm now ready to transfer my image onto my soft block. This is where you want to make sure that you're coloring really, really dark on the back. I've already had you all do this transfer in the past because we don't have any transfer paper, but you're basically using a really heavy lead pencil and you're coloring on the entire back of the sheet of paper as heavily as you can using the side of the pencil. You might have to have a pencil sharpener around just in case to do that. Okay, you can see here that I now have all of my back covered with a really dark lead pencil, and I'm going to flip it over so that it's laying directly in line on my soft cut block. I'm now going to tape it on all four sides to make sure that it doesn't move on me, because once you transfer it on, that's kind of where your image is going to be. So you'll want to tape it down to whatever your work surface is, preferably tape it where you're not going to have to transfer the image. So I'm kind of finding those white areas there to tape it down and make sure that I have it really secure. This is where your ballpoint pen comes in handy. You want to use the sharpness of a ballpoint pen, not a Sharpie, but something that has the ballpoint on there. And now, using as best you can your hand lifted up, don't rest your hand down. You're going to push really hard, even if it tears the paper a little bit, that's okay. You're tracing around all the detail of the column in my picture, or wherever your gray tones are. That's the area that we're going to carve away. So I'm going to trace around all of those areas, following as much detail as I can so that I can be as specific in my carving as I can. You'll notice that it's going to kind of catch on the paper a little bit because what you're pushing onto is a soft surface, so it catches a little bit. That's why my lines look a little bit jagged, but that's okay. So I will come back to you once I have everything transferred, and I'm pushing pretty hard with my pen to really get it to transfer fully. Okay, you can see now that I have completed the drawing, and notice in some of these little detail areas with the text, I had to color in the areas just because they were so small. It was going to be hard to define what I needed to cut out and what I needed to remain. So depending on your technique, you can always color in the gray areas if that's easier for you to read. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to untape the section here just to make sure that I have indeed transferred. So you can see that the graphite from the pencil did transfer onto the soft block as best it can. It's not going to be perfect. And so I can take away my actual image like so. You'll see there's still some rub lines and so forth, and that's just from pressure from your hand. So you want to avoid that as much as possible, but it gives you a good idea. Then I would suggest having your drawing right above it. So your image should be right near you so you know exactly what you're carving. This is when you're going to bring out your carving tools. And I am a fan of the number 2 blade, because the number 2 blade right here has a really nice V. Right there, you can see that V, and it allows you to cut deep, but also with sharp lines. A lot of people are drawn to the number 1, which is fine, and it gives you lots of detail, but it doesn't carve as deep. Notice it's a much, much smaller V. The problem with the 1 is that your ink will build up in those shallow grooves, and it won't print well. That's why I'm a big fan of using the number 2 to get your detail, and then working up to a number 3, 4, or a 5 for larger areas of color as you go through. Most of you will have one that looks like this. Some of you might have a maroon one. The idea is that you're going to place the blade in, you'll unscrew this, then you're going to place the blade inside of that hole right there. If you have the maroon one, it may be a slightly different technique, but you'll see that there'll be a little device to hold it in place, and then tighten it. Just be careful, because you are dealing with a blade that does have a sharp point if you hold it in such a way that you can cut yourself. So you always want to hold behind where you're carving. So I'm going to start by going along my gray edge here. And this is just to help me define. You get just kind of a little scoop. Many of you have done this before in Art Foundation, so this is not a new material or a new technique. We're just dividing out the image a little bit differently. So you see what I'm doing. I'm adding all of the detail around the outside, and that's actually, I can feel the groove. I can actually feel it. If you can't feel it, then you haven't carved deep enough. You may have to go back in and go a little bit deeper to pull out that color as need be. I'm working on this gray column right here, so I'm removing all of it. Now, you could patiently go in here and keep digging away. It's going to take a while. This is where you can change blades. Just be careful when you're taking your blade out. And then now I'm going to get a wider blade. You have a number 4, which has more of a U shape. A 5 is a very big U shape. And a number 3 is another kind of V, but a softer V. I'm going to use the 3 for this space. And I'm going to remove a large section because this was showing up as gray on my image. Now, because many of you have very detailed images, what you might find is that you'll need to draw on the actual soft cut with black pen. Like, I could go back in here and define these a little bit finer, make sure that I'm actually getting the detail that I want, because it does tend to smudge. So ballpoint pen works great for that reason. or even a Sharpie, but the powder on the surface of this block, which is like part of the manufacturer, you can see some of the powder there, it sometimes makes the Sharpie dry up. That's why I feel like I have better luck with an actual ballpoint. Now, does this have to be perfectly smooth in here? No. That little bit of grooving is okay. It's part of the quality of a soft cut or a linoleum cut. It's okay as long as it's below the surface. And if you run your finger along and you can feel that it's below the surface, then you're in good shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue carving. I'll come back to you once I have everything carved out and show you the next process. Okay, you can see now that I have carved out everything. So there's texture there. I did the details. There's a little bit of smudging, but the fact that it's dirty does not make it's not a problem. The dirt will come off when we wash it. So one of the things I noticed when I looked at my original image, and you might notice it as well, is that my sky is pure white. Now in my highlight print, it didn't print anything, right? Because there was no gray tones to print. So I need to make a decision right now if I choose to take out the highlight of the sky now or if I want to do it later. So in terms of planning, one of the things you'll notice is that the raised areas will catch the ink. In other words, that's where the ink will lay. So if I choose pink as my first color, my sky will be pink. And you'll have to know that. If I choose to carve it out, it means it will be whatever the color of the paper is. So if I'm printing on white paper, it'll show up white. If I'm printing on black paper, it'll show up black. If I'm on a color piece of paper, like red or pink or green, the sky would be that color because I've removed the physical block itself. So you have to make that decision. It's totally up to you. You can choose to cut the sky out at a later time, or you can choose to cut it out now. Kind of depends on your plan. I'm going to keep it as is right now. I'm going to cut it out later, and I'll show you why you kind of want to make that decision sometimes, because you get some really cool effects by having sections in chunks, different colors. Now, the other thing too is you have a lot of this scrap. If you have pets at home, be very cautious, and I would make sure that you sweep up everything with like a dustpan or a vacuum, because this is not something that you want your cat or dog or guinea pig or whatever pet you might have to eat, because it's made of rubber, all right? And it will not digest for them. So I would highly suggest making sure you have a garbage can nearby, kind of sweep that up and make sure that it gets thrown away. Now you're at the point where you can start to figure out if this is enough of your carving or if you want to do some more. So just kind of re-look at your original image and then look at what you've carved and decide, have I carved out enough? And you don't want to over carve on the highlights. This is the carve that you'll do the least amount of carving on generally. So I've decided that I'm done and I'm ready for the printing process.